Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. This is Marta's Magical Mystery Class, and this is video number 11 of 13 on the drafting process. We've been talking a lot about elements of fiction and literary terms and just how to keep persisting in the very long process of writing a novel. If you've been subscribing or if you've been watching these, you know the intent is to use this channel, the videos of this channel, to help you through the process of writing, editing, and preparing for publication for a first novel. All of that over the course of about a year and a half. So we are in the process of finishing out the drafting section of these videos, and actually they're going to come a little faster than every 2 weeks here because I will be breaking entirely from this format for the month of November 2021. I'm instead going to have a whole lot of NaNoWriMo videos. So for those of you that have not been taking this apace and are gonna just NaNoWriMo it in November, I will be there for that. For those of you who have been taking this apace and writing about 2,500 words a week, 5,000 words every 2 weeks, which is how the videos are basically paced, we will be wrapping that section in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we're coming up, and if you've been following the videos, if you've been staying with it, you're at 50,000 words. 50,000 words is really fantastic, folks. That's more than 80% of the way there. You are very much to be congratulated on having gotten this far. Stay the course. You're almost there. You're almost there. It's almost over. And for those of you who are doing NaNoWriMo, get ready to start your engines. It will be coming soon. During NaNoWriMo, instead of these video for each channel, substantial video for each channel every 2 weeks, I am going to do a video for each channel. This channel, Marta's Magical Mystery Class, and its sibling channel, Marta's Sci-Fi Seminar, every day for the 30 days of November. Now, there'll be little shorty videos, most of them, inspiring bits of prose from some of the novels I've reviewed, quick tips, writerly advice, some writing prompts, and we'll just keep things moving all through November, again, with the idea that we are celebrating NaNoWriMo. I am also, I've had my work in progress kind of set to the side the last couple of months, and I will be spending November digging that back out. So you'll also be getting updates on how well I managed to practice what I preach here on the channel. So November will be exciting. For today, I have no reviews for you. I will be back with reviews next week, but I wanted to try something a little different. We've kind of run through a lot of the elements of fiction terms that I think require some real discussion and explanation. So the next 3 videos here, we're just going to be talking about other literary terms, other ways of talking about fiction, other things that might be useful in particular as we get into the editing phase. So what I'm going to talk about today is the notion of rising action and falling action, okay? We also tend to talk about this as like the build-up and the climax of a book. There's a big French word, the denouement, which I think technically translates to something like the unknotting or the untying, which follows the climax of a story. Climax is the big point where everything comes together. It's hard to avoid sex metaphors in traditional discussions of this kind of rising and falling action. Honestly, I think the better metaphor for all of this is a roller coaster. So I'm going to argue that every book is a roller coaster. Particularly when we're talking about genre fiction, where stuff has to happen to be interesting. We have to keep our readers engaged. Rising action, ta-da! And I've actually drawn some pictures for you tonight, and you're all going to see why I haven't spent more time drawing pictures for you previously. But this is an extreme example of rising action and falling action, okay? This is the kind of novel, as I try to hang on to legal head, this represents the kind of novel that is all build, that all just constantly rearing you up, constantly tightening the tension, constantly building the suspense until we get to the very end, and then bang, the most suspenseful thing that could happen happens, and then whoop, there's just very little wind down. And it's all, as roller coasters go, that kind of ride is exciting, and rather than a straight line up, it is often more a series of consecutive loops up, or you can maybe see I've also got kind of sawtooth kind of steps up. As roller coasters go, the only real satisfaction available here is this kind of end point where it's like tension, 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 bang, and then it's all over. That doesn't make for a very good roller coaster. And in the hands of most writers, it doesn't make for a very good novel. I would say Ira Levin and James Patterson are the only folks I've read that really managed to pull off something like this. And it's probably doing both of them a disservice to say that this is what their books are like. Because there are other payoffs and satisfactions, even in those novels. And certainly, in the novels that I've been recommending on the channel, it's nice to have a roller coaster that does something else besides go to the top of a hill and then drop you. It's nice to have a roller coaster that takes some turns, that does some swivels, that spends some time going to one side and then going to the other and maybe loops you up and backwards. Right? So, where that's an extreme example of what rising and falling action look like, this is a lot more typical, okay? You have a build up to about the quarter point, then something kind of exciting happens here at the quarter point. Then we maintain that level of tension until we get about halfway, okay? Something else happens at halfway that spikes the tension until we get about to the 3/4 point. We don't have any real flattening in most books at the 3/4 point, but we might have a variance in the level of tension between the 3/4 point and about the 95% points. About 95% of the way through most books is where you have a little falling action, where you have your denouement and things get resolved, and we kind of, if you're reading a series, then we're setting things up for the next book in the series, okay? So this is pretty typical of how that works. But I thought, I've had so much fun reading and reviewing books on the channel, I wanted to look at a few of the books that I thought were really outstanding and really do some thinking about, is it the structure that makes them outstanding? Is it something that's happening there? And I do think that's part of it in all three of the novels that I have diagrammed for you, as it were. So, in place of reviews today, we're going to get a little review of, in graphical form, of some of the books I've already covered on the channel. This is my diagram of Fenderson Djeli Clark's A Master of Djinn. And as you can see, and this was really wonderful to have the Kindle to go back and be able to really look at the quarter point and the halfway and the 75 and really look and see, gosh, are these things where I think they are? Are they moved? Are they different? And sure enough, Clark has rising action, things build and climb, and then there's some really exciting incident here at the 25% mark, more excitement here at the 50, more excitement at the 75, and then where a lot of books do plateau a little, there's usually more rising action between 75 and kind of 95%. But a lot of books will still plateau you until we get to 85, maybe 90% of the way. But Clark keeps cranking the tension here after the 75% mark. Things just keep gathering. Things just keep happening. And there's a lot, actually. I didn't draw this out as well. There's a lot of things that really start to gather right around the halfway mark as well. What I did notice here at the 60% mark and right here at the 90% mark, two really interesting things happen. I'm not going to do spoilers. I hate spoilers. I know sometimes I'm overgeneral with my reviews. It's because I don't want to give you spoilers, because I just want you to get the book on your own terms. But I will say what happens here at the 60% mark and what happens here at the 90% mark, big action stuff happens in Clark's book at the 25, at the 50, at the 75. But big information stuff happens in Counterpoint at the 60 and at the 90. So I'm not going to tell you what that big information is, but let's just say we get some good surprise reveal stuff happening at those points. So another reason to read A Master of Djinn, and actually the short story Dead Djinn in Cairo, the novella The Haunting of Tramcar 15, that lead up to that. I have alluded several times back to Land of Shadows, the Rachel Howzell Hall thriller. Okay? And I waved my hands around a lot and talked about the two-part structure with the cold case and the present case. Yeah. That was probably not terribly effective from a visual standpoint. This might be more effective. But here in Land of Shadows by Rachel Howzell Hall, there's a lot of action in this book. And the action doesn't actually follow the 25, the 50, the 75% mark for a four-part structure. The action is ongoing. Not quite in the way of that initial extreme diagram, but what is interesting, things do happen, significant things do happen at the 25, the 50, and the 75. Hall uses those points not to crank the action of the book. Hall uses those points to crank the information, because she's reminding us the real thing that's happening in this story is that this is an investigation. The real tension is around what information our investigators have. And at the 25%, at the 50, and at the 75, they get significant new pieces of information. There's a wavy line here that winds around the main line, because this actually represents the cold case. So where we have the present case, the story as it's happening in the moment, which again, the information of the story is what follows the standard rising action and falling action structure. The cold case, I had thought of the cold case as happening more of that around the midpoint of the book, but when I went back and looked, indeed, she's got the cold case woven in here throughout the narrative, and there are cold case reveals along the way also. Toward the end, we do have the action of the present day narrative rise, where the cold case comes along more steadily, but in the end, we get the resolution of both cases. So I thought that was a really neat way to draw things out, to look at Hall's book. The last picture I have for you, and you can see why, given the time, I wasn't going to try to do reviews also, or additional reviews, I should say. The third book I wanted to look at because it was, there aren't a lot of historical mysteries. It is a subgenre, but they certainly aren't a dominant strain in mystery. And the pacing of Nev March's Murder in Old Bombay felt different to me in a way that it was a little harder to articulate until I went back and started looking at, okay, there are things that happen at the 25 and there are things that happen at the, or particularly at the half, at the 50 and at the 75. But interestingly, I would say the action of March's Murder in Old Bombay divides out, rather than into a 4-part structure, divides out into a 5-act structure, more like a play. In the video I did on structure, I said, oh, you can divide it into 3, you can divide it into 4, you can divide it into 5. I don't know if I made it clear. 4 is probably the most typical in a lot of contemporary novels. So it was really interesting to look at March's book and realize, nope, there's movement here at 20, at 40, at 60, at 80. And interestingly, in March's novel, there's very minimal falling action. The suspense might build more slowly because it's a 5-act structure rather than a 4-act structure. But then it doesn't really fall off. Like down to the last few pages, we're left with a lot of tension about how some things are going to be resolved. And she's really, I don't know that there's going to be a sequel, but she has really set herself up well for a sequel. So this was a really interesting exercise to go back and look at these books and try to chart the rising and the falling action. And I hope by illustrating rising and falling action, I've given you more sense of what they are than if I had just sat here and talked about rising and falling action. I would encourage you to try to chart a book that you've read recently. See if you can figure out what's happening. And a good way to do it is just kind of figure out about where the quarter point of the story is, about where the halfway point, about where the 3/4 point is, and then try to see what's happening at those points. If you're not seeing a lot of movement at those points in the story, and you felt like it was a story where the pacing was a little more leisurely, you might look and see if it had a 5-act structure like this. Conversely, if you felt like it was just really going from the beginning, maybe it looked more like that, the extreme rising action. And it could also have been a 3-act structure. But I think it can be very useful to look at those things as again, when we talk about reading like writers, doing this kind of exercise is a way of reading like a writer, because you're looking at how another author has structured their book. And again, we're going to come into the editing phase. I may be taking November off to do NaNoWriMo stuff for the channels, but I will be right back with you in December to pick up and start the editing process videos. Okay? So hang in there. There will be more to come. But in the meantime, keep reading, keep writing, and keep thinking about how all of this stuff fits together. Try the charting exercise. I'm sure you can do it in a way that will be more legible than I have. Good luck. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.